It is 1,000 degrees in my studio today, but we're doing this anyway because I really do like this topic. I think it's pretty cool. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in again for another episode of Tonetuga TV. I'm Mike Varela, and guess what? Chase Bliss is going direct. And I know everyone's probably heard this because it's been in the news nonstop for pretty much the last week and a half. But a lot of the other videos that I've seen on the topic don't really cover the real reason that I think that Chase Bliss is making this move. But more importantly, this isn't news at all. It really doesn't impact the customer at all, and Chase Bliss really doesn't owe anybody an explanation as to why they're doing it. Chase Bliss is arguably one of the most innovative and commercially successful brands of the last decade. Everything that they release lights the internet on fire. The media wave that comes after literally anything that they do is huge. You can't avoid it. So it might seem a little bit foolish that they're pulling all their inventory out of stores, but I think there's a lot of really good business reasons why they might do that I want to go into today. Well, the first thing I want to talk about is working with dealers. Now remember, this is all broad brushstrokes. Your individual experience will vary depending on the brand and depending on the store that you're working with. But in general, it's industry standard that when you sell to a shop, you're selling it at about 30% off MAP, which is manufacturer's asking price. And you might say, well, that sucks. This pedal costs $100. But now I have to sell it for 70 to a shop. But at the same time, you have to remember that the shop isn't buying one pedal. They're buying 10, 20, 50, 100, whatever they want to inventory. So say in 1 month you would sell 10 pedals for $100 each. That'd be $1,000 direct. Well, now you have the opportunity to sell those directly to a shop at 30% off. And instead of waiting a whole month to get your $1,000, you now get $700 at once. So there's a lot of significant advantages for working directly with shops. You can move a lot more inventory a lot quicker. But one of the bigger reasons you might want to work with shops has to do with local availability. Now, if you're one of those people that prefers to go to your local shop, you got a tight relationship with them, you probably prefer to do all your shopping there. The downside of that is you're only exposed to a very narrow field of the inventory available to the whole market. Only what is stocked by that shop is going to be what you see. So if you're at a shop and the shop wouldn't stock Chase Bliss anyway, well then you're probably not really going to consider those pedals if that's the primary place that you do your shopping. It's just not available to you. For a smaller builder, dealers really do matter because more dealers typically does mean more exposure, and more exposure typically means more sales, either now or in the future. One of the biggest benefits to having that strong dealer network is when it comes to your new product releases. Now, anytime you release a new product, there's going to be that thought in the back of your head of, I really hope this works out. Because really, anytime you release something new, it's a gamble on the market. You never really know if it's going to be a hit or a miss. Regardless of if it's a hit or a miss, you've already made the investment into making that upfront inventory for your first release. Now, if you have a strong dealer network, there's a good chance that you could offload a significant portion of your inventory to shops before you even launch your product. So there could be very little risk to you depending on how you want to have your business model function. Which brings me to one of my first reasons you might really want to go direct. So back to the example of new product releases. Say for your first run of pedals for a new product, you're going to make 100 of them. So say those 100 pedals each cost $100 to make. Your total cash outlay for this whole run is going to be $10,000. And say your sale price per pedal is going to be $300, your gross sales are going to be 30 grand after you've sold all 100, and your net sales, that's your take home after everything, is going to be 20 grand. Now if you do that same math again for dealers, it works a little bit differently. You have the same quantity, you've got the same cost to build each pedal, but the sale price is going to be subject to that 30% discount that you're giving the dealer, which means your gross sales are going to be much lower, and your take home is going to be almost half of what you had if you had sold them all direct. Now, you don't really need to be a finance whiz to see that there's a lot of really good reasons to just go direct. But if the math is that easy, why would anyone bother stocking stores? Well, it has a lot to do with economies of scale. If Chase Bliss is going to stay in stores, they really need to tackle the profit issue by leveraging those economies of scale. So Chase Bliss already manufactures at a much higher volume than Tonetuga. When I do a run of pedals, I'm typically doing a run between 50 and 200 pedals. Chase Bliss probably looks at 1,000 pedals as a small run. So when I need to shave cost, it's a lot easier for me to leverage economies of scale because I'm already operating at the lower end of that spectrum. Meaning if I buy 50 foot switches, it costs more per foot switch than if I buy 100 foot switches. And it costs even less per switch if I buy 500 of them or 1,000. Where you run into issues with this is there are diminishing returns with that economy of scale. But just because I'm manufacturing at a higher level doesn't necessarily mean I'm always going to be able to stay on that curve. If I need to go to the next price break for volume, I might have to buy 10,000 switches. And at some point you have to consider the weight of whatever you're purchasing is going to physically cost more to ship than the amount that you're saving by buying at that higher quantity. So it's safe to assume Chase Bliss is already at that 1,000+ level, and maybe the next price break is at that 10,000 points. But there's only a marginal change in the price of whatever they're purchasing from 1,000 quantity to 10,000 quantity. And this exists for all components, whether it be knobs or jacks or enclosures. And it's probably the case that Chase Bliss cannot continue to leverage those economies of scale without significantly increasing their manufacturing capacity. But there's a whole 30% of their profit that they can harvest immediately by just not dealing with shops. And here's the thing, nothing's stopping you from having a hybrid direct sales and dealer relationship, but the type of shop that you're in really does matter, and the business model of those shops can vary greatly. So whatever your strategy is for expansion or your strategy is for distribution, you really need to consider that before you decide to take on a new dealer. So there's a couple different types of dealers. I've broken them down to pretty large categories. Number one that I want to talk about is online only shops. Now these are shops that don't have a brick and mortar location, and these can be a pretty strategic partner if they're, say, located on a different continent. But at the same time, with the nature of online sales, you might end up competing with your dealer because you both list on the same online websites. If you're 100% online and they're 100% online, you're always going to have that issue. The next type of shop is overseas dealers. So during 2021, 86% of my sales were based in the US. The ones that were based overseas, I typically didn't fulfill myself anyway. It was during COVID, supply chain was all screwed up, shipping was even worse. A bunch of stuff that got shipped ended up getting lost or just never arriving. It was a lot easier when I got a sale in Japan to send an email to my Japanese dealer and have them fill the order directly. By doing that, you end up with a much happier relationship with the dealer. They're getting the sale that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten, and I don't have to deal with the product getting lost and the customer being disappointed. From Joel's video that he posted, I think he got lucky. One of his employees is relocating to Amsterdam, and I would bet that he's going to end up using that location as one of his distribution sites. He's probably going to end up keeping a couple other shops internationally as well on different continents just to have different launch sites to better fulfill the customer's needs. Big box stores. These are your Guitar Center, this is your Sam Ash. Odds are if they had Chase Bliss stock, they probably had too many pedals in store to really be informed about how to use those things properly. So big box stores don't really lend themselves well to products with multiple modes and 500 dip switches. It's a lot easier to explain to the customer a more simple product like a tube screamer than it is for a really complicated product like a Chase Bliss pedal. The local mom and pop shops. Now these are the top tier of dealers. They typically carry a smaller range of products, so their employees are much more knowledgeable about the inventory that they carry. So if you walk in the shop and you want to play metal, they're probably not going to recommend you a tube screamer and a deluxe reverb. The mom and pop shops know what the customer is going for, and they know what products they have in store that'll help get them in the direction that they're trying to go. They typically also have a more loyal customer base, so a lot of the sales that you get in those mom and pop shops have a good chance of translating to direct sales anyway directly through your website, if they like the product that's being pushed at the shop. Pedals can also be used as an upsell item. If you're in shop buying a $1,000 guitar, it's probably not much of a stretch to assume that you could get talked into a couple accessories like a $200 overdrive pedal. That doesn't really work with the Chase Bliss products. If you're buying a $1,000 guitar, it's probably pretty unlikely that you're gonna get talked into buying a $400 pedal. It's just not a practical thing to assume. Now, does any of this really matter at all? I say no. Chase Bliss owes nobody an explanation for what they're doing. It doesn't change the product. It doesn't change the marketing. And if they have multiple locations across the world, it doesn't change the availability of their product. It'll probably make it better, to be honest. The only thing that changes is Chase Bliss is going to now get to keep a larger percentage of their profit that they should be keeping anyway. I mean, they make some top tier products. They've put in the time engineering these things. They put in the time branding these things. And for the volume that they're manufacturing at, it probably makes more sense for them to end up selling direct anyway. I would bet that the majority of Chase Bliss sales come from people that are specifically looking for Chase Bliss products anyway. So somebody who is going into a shop specifically looking for a Chase Bliss pedal is probably going to have no problem just going to their website to buy it anyway. This is just a brief overview into some of the things that I really wanted to go more in depth with and really explain some of the business reasons why they might want to do what they're doing. Again, I really don't think any of this really matters in the grand scheme of things. I think that there's just so little news to talk about these days that you really have to dig deep to find these types of stories. I really think if Joel hadn't made his video online, nobody would really even notice that they were doing this. I mean, I can't really count many local stores in my area that carry Chase Bliss anyway. It's just such a complicated product. And it's not that it's complicated bad, it's complicated because it's feature packed. And it's just not something that your average employee at a guitar shop is really going to be able to explain to a customer how to use. I mean, chances are if you're buying one, you've seen it online, you've watched a dozen demos on it, and you want to play with it and you want to tweak it yourself. You're not going to want to sit in a shop for 2 hours twisting knobs deciding if you like it or not. You're just going to get it. If you like today's video, please like and subscribe. Again, these are just a couple things that I think weren't covered well enough in some of the content that I've seen online regarding the story. Does Chase Bliss have any of the issues that I've mentioned before? Probably to some degree. But at the same time, they've got such a strong following that I think pretty much anything they release from here on out is going to be a hit regardless. So I don't think they're going to have any of these problems for very long. So that's all I have to say on the issue. I think that we can finally bury this thing. Be back soon with some new content. I hope you guys are enjoying it because I sure am having a lot of fun doing this. Everybody stay cool, and I'll see you next time. And shoot. And at the same time, if you're a blues dad, they're probably not going to recommend you a metal gig. A metal gig. You know what I mean. Big box stops. Now, this is your Sam Ash